if the mortgage rules stay the same, which is that essentially you can only loan up to 75% of the value, I think that sort of protects you against the downside somewhat of properties falling in value by up to a quarter, which is like quite drastic, right? So you haven't lost any money until the house prices have lost more than 25%. So my feeling is in the sort of growth phase, which is for me, say the next decade, I would be lending right up to that number, that 75% number, on the basis that I was using that money to get a better return than it's costing me in interest. So it's like if I can borrow any money at 2% and then invest it for a 10% return, I feel like I'd be daft not to.
Yeah, definitely. That actually goes back to what we originally spoke about the mindset, how people they maybe only see the downside, fail to see the upside, in the sense that maybe somebody looks and says, oh, for me to take X amount of pounds from my home will cost me X amount of percent or X amount of pounds over so many years. Whereas maybe the entrepreneurial mind or the kind of mindset looks at, right, okay, but if I can get that 3%, what can I do with that money to generate 10%, and therefore actually make that debt a good debt, which is something that a lot of people tend to have.
That's a good point, right? If you take out additional borrowing on your house to spend it on your garden or a car or a holiday, then it's totally separate proposition. But like you and I know that sort of the money that we put down, with any actual cash that we put down, we're trying to get at least 10% return on that indefinitely for the rest of our lives, right? So if mortgage rates are 2%, 3%, 5% at that point, and you're locking, and you're always locking in for a fixed period as well, and ready to assess it again at the end of that, then it feels like it's the sensible, just mathematical decision. But a lot of it depends on that sort of assumption that I put in at the start, which is me saying, I think it's quite drastic to suggest that property will fall very quickly more than 25%. And that's, it's a common thing in sort of science or maths. You know, you list your assumptions at the start and you say, on that basis, this is what I've concluded. And I think that's where I go with it, where other people, you know, as soon as COVID hits, everybody's like, property prices are going to drop 50%. I'm like, they're not. Or I'm willing to continue my life on the basis that they won't, and willing to make calculations and decisions on that basis. If you're not, then that's fine, because I might be wrong. But, you know, everybody's got to make calculated gambles throughout their life, right? And, you know, that comes down to, you know, the car that you buy, the roads you cross, you know, the sports you play. And, you know, I'm comfortable at 75% LTV.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. That's where we sit as well. We kind of looked over the last recession and we were saying, right, okay, how much did house prices drop in certain parts of things like that? I can't remember the exact statistic, but I think locally it was something like 17%. And therefore we were again thinking, right, okay, we've always got 25% equity in a property. Could we withstand 17%? Obviously, we do our maths to see if the whole 25 way to be, but the whole point is to just calculate mitigate risk wherever you can, and then ultimately move forward, like I said, based on scientific approach.
I think as well, it's like even if say you got yourself in a position in, say, let's say 7 years time, you've got yourself in a position where you go, all right, I could pay all these down to 50% LTV and save myself a few grand a year or whatever in interest. You know, if let's say everything was rocketing a bit and you're like, ooh, you know, this is an explosive growth kind of phase where, you know, it's definitely not going to last forever. I'd be tempted to keep the cash on hand, because you don't know which one's going to fuck you up. Where if you start paying them all down, then it might have only been that one mortgage that was coming around where you had to throw 20 grand in to sort it out. Where if you lock up the money all over the place, then you're just kind of hedging your bets a bit. I don't know. I think you'd have to assess it always at the moment, but I think instead of paying down 20 grand on 5 houses, I'd be tempted to keep 100 grand in the bank instead. Because then if one property suddenly became unmortgageable because it had dropped 20%, then I could just be like, okay, there's the cash, we'll just settle up for now, and I'm continuing to rent it out, it's no problem, and then I'll sort it out as and when.
Sounds like you've got an answer for your question there. You pose the question, what instant access savings account can I get where I maybe get 2.5%? Maybe the whole point is you don't need to earn anything, because what you actually earn, what you actually get from that inside the bank is peace of mind.
That's the other thing. Have you ever heard of an offset mortgage?
I have actually, yeah.
So they're really common in sort of other countries, or more common in other countries. And it's like, so you have obviously a big pile of cash, but some of it's like an overdraft, but at the same rate as your mortgage. So that probably is something that would work in terms of what I'm talking about. So imagine I had a mortgage on my own home that I live in at 2.5%, say, but I could keep 50 grand in there at any point and save myself 2.5%. That's essentially like earning 2.5% because it's saving me money and interest. So maybe that's the solution in the long run if I could set up that. And it might end up being a higher rate than I would have paid, but because I can keep cash in there, it saves me money. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the option.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're more, like you said, less common in this country, but only a year or so ago, I'm sure they were doing that for first-time buyers, not to help them onto the property ladder. So mum and dad could park a certain amount of their rate, depending on how much mum and dad had.
Yeah, I did see that. That was quite interesting.